was the 21 Days of Positivity one, which I talked about last week. And that's where we really discussed compassion and empathy and self-love and all of these issues that are related to compassion. So I just wanted to talk briefly about one of my projects before going into compassion. The one we're doing right now is called Every Child Has Rights. It's a children's rights campaign, which we hope will raise awareness of the rights of the child, because from the time that we're born as children, we have rights, right? Both Islam and secular education have kind of mapped out exactly what kind of rights we have. And those are our human rights, you know? So we're kind of raising awareness of that. We're doing that in a threefold way. The first one is by our child ambassadors, and you can find them on our Instagram page at Sazesh. We've kind of given them the platform so that they can share what they believe their rights are and how they're fulfilling those rights. So, for example, the right of freedom of expression, the right of creativity, and so many other different rights that they're talking about. So that's on our Instagram page. We also have a survey going on. So if you scan this QR code with your camera, you will be taken straight away to our survey page. It's literally a 60-second survey, and it's completely anonymous. We want to know what you think about children's rights and what you think about children, and what you believe their rights are. So inshallah, hopefully you will fill out that survey. And if you want to know more information about that, you can go to our website at sazesh.com/projects. Okay, so that's the current project that we're doing, but we do quite a lot of projects throughout the year, and we've got some really exciting ones coming up, which I cannot reveal right now, but I hope that you guys, do check out our website, follow us on Instagram, and try to just engage with all the different projects that we have, inshallah. Right, so without further ado, compassion fatigue. So first I'm going to start by talking about compassion and empathy, what they are and how we manifest them in our daily life. We may not be aware about it, but we do it on a daily basis. Okay. And then compassion fatigue. So what happens when things go wrong, right? And why do things go wrong? What is compassion fatigue? And I'm also going to be talking about the concept of burnout and how it's similar but kind of different to compassion fatigue. More on that later. And then I'm going to be talking about how to deal with it. So re-energizing your compassion and how to make sure that we're using the right kind of techniques that can help us balance our compassion so that we're not getting fatigued or we're not experiencing burnout, right? So without further ado, compassion and empathy. I'm going to start with empathy because that's the main one. Whoa, this thing is going too fast. Okay, empathy. So empathy is the very basic or simplistic characteristic of being human. Okay, it's part of who we are. It begins with the ability to understand another person, their feelings, their experiences, who they are as a human being, and then kind of moves to communicating with them or confirming whether what we've understood is the right thing or the wrong thing. So via communication. And then finally acting in a way that is very kind and helpful or supportive. Okay, so empathy, the word, I mean, I know all of us have heard of sympathy. I think that's the common word that's been going around. Empathy is kind of similar to that, but it's more on a very basic level, I would say, right? Because you're not just viewing the person or feeling bad for another person, you're going the step further. And it's actually one of the key elements of positive psychology. So positive psychology is a branch of psychology that studies the strengths and virtues of a human being and how we use those strengths and virtues to thrive as a community. And empathy is very much the core concept of positive psychology. So A little bit about empathy then. Empathy is known to increase our moral reasoning, our ethical behaviors. It also nurtures a kind of caring or considerate personality where we tend to be more inclusive, more open-minded, and that all can be achieved with empathy. And this is simply because we're beginning to understand the other person, right? We're trying to put ourselves in their shoes, so to speak. And by doing that, we're becoming more sensitive and mindful of them and what they're going through as a human being. And we're kind of, at the same time, trying to understand what we're going through. So it also helps us understand social interactions. So empathy is a very vast topic, and I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible in this session today, inshallah. Um, so simply put, empathy is divided into three. It's not something that you can touch. So it's not very clear, the division between the different kinds of empathies. You can experience all of them at one go or one of them. It really does depend on the context. As I mentioned last week, context is everything, okay? But for the purposes of explaining what's going on with empathy, I'm kind of like shown the division. So it's divided into three. The first one is cognitive empathy. So cognitive empathy is kind of the ability to perceive and understand the other person's feelings. Okay, you're being cognizant or cognitive about it, right? You're perceiving their thoughts, you're perceiving their emotions from what they say or what they do. And the thing about cognitive empathy or anything cognitive is that it's not an exact science, right? It's not something that's factual. It definitely involves making mistakes, because when you're perceiving something or when you're reading something, you can definitely read the wrong thing, right? What you think you're reading is not going to be the same as what the other person is trying to communicate or trying to express. So it involves making mistakes. You can misinterpret someone's actions or thoughts or expressions. That's very possible. But at the same time, it really allows us to practice being non-judgmental, because we realize exactly how we can be wrong at times, and then also how other people can be wrong when they're perceiving us, right? And then we also can practice being patient, because we don't have all of the answers at that time, and more observant. Definitely does encourage us to be more observant of what is going on in our surroundings. And these are all attributes that Islam highly recommends. So practicing cognitive empathy can help us better communicate then with others, and kind of in a very effective way, because you've observed something. It's not something someone has said. It's like me observing when you're stomping your foot or throwing things around and asking, are you okay? I notice you're a bit tense, or you're frustrated, you know and that's just a very good way of communicating, because you've perceived it. They haven't said anything. It's more about their actions and their feelings. And it doesn't just help us in personal settings, it can help us in professional settings as well. When you notice someone's having a bad day, chances are that person hasn't really told you, I'm having a bad day, but you've noticed it, you've observed that they're having a bad day, and your cognitive empathy has kicked in at that time. Right, so that's cognitive empathy. Second one is emotional empathy. And feel free to interrupt me if you want to ask any questions, because sometimes I tend to go off on a tangent. So if no one has any questions, I'll continue with emotional empathy. So emotional empathy or affect.
Sarah, can I just stop you for a minute here? Is that okay?
Yeah,
I just wanted us to find what is the difference between real empathy and sympathy? Is there a difference, or are they the same thing? Like you said, very often we mistake it for sympathy.
right.
And from my understanding, sympathy could be, oh, I'm sorry, or kind of being a little bit feeling sad for somebody. But
Mhm.
empathy is really putting yourself in their shoes. Is that the correct understanding?
So the way I see it, and I could be wrong, because there are so many conflicting opinions out there, and sympathy and empathy are both psychological constructs. They're not really facts. There's no exact definition of them.
Okay, okay.
It's more of a construct that's created. So, um, if I were to think of the main difference, is that sympathy is more temporary or transient.
Okay.
It's just something that you feel in passing and say, "Oh, I sympathize," or I really feel bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
then you're kind of moving on, so you don't really
Mm.
form that connection, so to say,
Right.
or that emotional attachment. Um, some people have said that cognitive empathy, that the first empathy I just talked about, that could count as sympathy. But then again, it really does depend on how you view the world, right?
Mm. Okay.
So yeah, whereas when you come to empathy, empathy is so multifaceted and it's got layers of connection that you can form with another human being, whether that's a family member or a friend or someone in a social setting. So I feel like there's been a general move towards empathy in the last decade or so, and that's just because it's more positive, it's more holistic, it just it makes you feel good,
Okay.
right?
All right.
It
Thank you so
rather,
much. Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks.
it's not just like a passing
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so emotional empathy. Emotional empathy or effective empathy is where we can share the same thoughts as feelings as someone else, but then and then at the same time we're feeling their distress, or we understand when they're feeling distressed. So you see how it's a step further. We're not just perceiving their emotions and feelings, now we're kind of feeling it as well. We're our feelings are connected, our emotions are connected. So when you see someone is struggling or suffering and you feel a little bit of that, or you feel that pinch, that's emotional empathy. um, it's considerably more difficult for the main reason that you're not just trying to understand now, you're actually mentally putting yourself in that person's shoes and building that emotional connection, right? And it's really, really beneficial, because what it does is it kind of prompts us, or very subtly nudges us to be more supportive, to be more reflective of what this other person's going through, and then also to be more objective, to really see the context of the situation. And as you guys know, I love context. Context is everything. So that's emotional empathy. And then finally, we have the main topic of today, compassion, compassionate empathy, right? Compassionate empathy is, again, when you go all in. So it's also known as empathic concern, and it's when you take one more step forward. So you're not just perceiving another person's feelings and emotions, you're not just understanding them, you're not also just putting yourself in their shoes, but now you want to do something about it. Now you actually want to help, you want to take an action, whether it's giving advice or lending an ear, or actually just take that person's problem and try and solve it. So you actually are prompted to do something about it, and that is compassion. That's the definition of compassion. And anytime you feel an urge to actually stand up and do something, that's compassionate. um, or rather, your compassion kicking in. And just as I said last week, we need to be careful, because our idea of helping someone is not the same as their idea. Sometimes we can get the ideas wrong. So clarify, communicate, try and ask, if you're unsure, if you've heard of someone suffering, then just ask them and say, how can I help? Right? Tell me, I genuinely want to help. I just need to know how. You know, you might have an idea of it, but you never know what the other person's thinking or what the other person needs. So, those are the three different types of empathy. And like I said, they're not really separate from each other, right? They can interact, they can mingle and mix, and we can experience all of them in one go at times as well. Okay, so that's compassion. Now, there is one other type of compassion that I feel is really important to talk about, and that's self compassion, compassion that we give to ourselves. And I feel that that is as important as the compassion we give to other people, because you need to have a space where your compassion's coming from, right? And if you're compassionate to yourself, then you have ample energy to be compassionate to others. As I know the Hadith says that charity begins at home. And I know we have different interpretations of that, but I also include compassion in that. When charity begins at home, compassion also begins at home. It begins with us, right? That's what I see that as one interpretation of that. So it's not just money or being kind or having good behavior, but it's also being considerate towards yourself, giving yourself a little bit of what you're giving other people. Um, so self-compassion has kind of been defined as this positive attitude or self-attitude that you have. And as it says on the slide, it involves treating yourself with warmth, with kindness, with understanding, you know. And a lot of the times that when I'm having conversations with different people, I think there's a misconception of what self-compassion really is, because a lot of people can mix it with self-love and say, I need to love myself first. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's important to note that self-compassion doesn't mean self-indulgence, doesn't mean you lose all kind of self-control. No, it doesn't mean feeling so sorry for yourself that you're prompted to do things that are not healthy. And it doesn't mean that you pity yourself or you start thinking about who you are and what you're entitled to, so that arrogance kind of comes in. That's not what self-compassion is. Self-compassion is more about understanding yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses, and accepting that you have them. But then you're not stopping there, because that's not what compassion is. Compassion is when you're acting, when you go that step further and you're prompted to take action, right? So you understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and you try and transform those negative habits or work on those negative habits that you may have to try and make them more positive. That's what self-compassion is. And I feel that, yeah, it is very easy to get it wrong, because there's a subtle difference between feeling sorry for yourself, but then actually doing something about it, actually saying, you know what, this is my weakness. I've noticed this problem in myself, but I can do something about it. I can be better at it. I can improve, self-develop, right? That's what life is all about, right? So that's, in a nutshell, what self-compassion is. As a very big topic, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into it here because it is very in-depth. But if you want more information, you can always get in touch with me. Google it. Google is amazing. It has a lot of information. And then also, if you're looking at Sazesh, our 21 Days of Positivity program, which is for free, it has a lot of great definitions and exercises on self-compassion and self-worth. So you can check those resources out. Okay. Right. So moving on. Now that we know what kind of compassion is, or how you can have a compassionate nature, I just wanted to ask you guys, if you have anything to share, how you think you've manifested your compassion. So when's a time that you can think of when you kind of acted out of compassion? I know it's a big question.
Is it as a mother we always manifest that kind of compassion?
That is so true. Yes, for your children, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's so true.
I know
Yeah.
my grandson fell off the chair today. And I don't know where this compassion came on, and you hold them and you hug them and you say, oh yes, I know that you're hurting, kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense. Or when someone's died, especially now in this time, I know I've seen many people who've lost their loved ones, and to be able to just pick up the phone and just say that, I'm here for you, and is there anything
Mm.
I can do for you? I think that's the closest we've got at this moment in time, in this COVID times, right? So I'm just concerned, how else can we show our compassion during these times when we can't meet people, you can't hug them, and you can't be with them physically.
You know, first of all, that's a very good example of being compassionate, especially in these times right now when, as you said, we can't be face to face. You're on the right track. Calling them and communicating with them is important. Asking them, just being really frank. I'm a very frank person, so I would ask the person, if you need to vent or if you need to just scream, I'm here for you. Because sometimes you can want to do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. As a psychologist, I would rather someone just scream it out than actually cause damage to themselves or someone else. right? Or harm themselves. So, and if a person does pass away, as you said, when if a lot of people have been passing away during COVID, it's it's hard because you can feel disconnected. Usually we have a support network, we have those people around us that we can hug, rely on, and they can look after everything. But now you're so isolated. Now you don't have that kind of physical support network. Rather, it's all very mental. So yeah, make sure you're communicating, make sure you're talking. I think postal services are still working. Post something. I remember when my mom passed away, it wasn't COVID, but I was very far away from some of my friends. And one of my friends actually sent me a care package in the mail. And it was this beautiful thing. It had Zamzam water in it. It had a book on how on it's okay to be sad. So it was an Islamic book, and it had loads of different references on how it's okay to be sad and how I can deal with it. So it was amazing. And she also sent me a diary. And so, something small, but it really touched me because it went a long way. And I still have that book today. It's on my shelf, actually right there. And I read it all the time, and it really leaves a mark, So send
Such a
something
good
small
idea.
if you
Absolutely.
can.
Very good
Yeah,
idea.
and if someone's in isolation or in quarantine, that's something that can be with them,
Yeah.
So you might not be able to be there, but you can send something in your stead. I think.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic idea. Thank you, Sarah. And also, one of our sisters was saying, actually, they say that you cannot give away something that you do not have. And she was
Mhm.
mentioning that if you cannot be compassionate to yourself, how can you can be compassionate to someone else? And I think you did touch on that point earlier, didn't you? So
Yeah.
perhaps the sister was just giving a comment, just to say that would you agree that if you don't have compassion for yourself, one cannot even
Oh,
have compassion
yeah.
to others?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Being compassion, I mean, right now we're describing it as something, so we're using words for it, but actually it's a state of mind. It's the energy that you have around you. And if you don't have that positive energy for yourself, you don't have any leftover energy to give other people. And that's why I've used the word manifest in this slide, because you're manifesting that compassionate energy or that positive energy through being compassionate. And it is a word, and we can use the Arabic word for it, ar-Rahman, being, which is a name of Allah as well. That's being compassionate. But this sister is very right. If you don't have that energy for yourself, how are you going to even try and give it to other people? You definitely can. I know loads of people who've been burnt out and are still giving and giving and giving. I've been in that situation myself. um and it is possible to do that, but there's a fine line, because you notice it starts becoming detrimental to your mental health, your physical health, sometimes your spiritual health as well, because you just don't have any leftover energy for yourself. So thank you very much for sharing that, sister.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's
And also a beautifully sister Nasima said that empathy is really a very deep emotion in the Quranic psychology as well. And she was mentioning the word atifi, feelings. And you said Rahman, and there are lots of different words we talk about showing empathy towards others, right? Thank you. Yeah. And I think we've got somebody's comment as well, that during the downward mental health spiral, what steps do you take to keep yourself in check, whether you're being compassionate to yourself or not?
um that's a very good question.
Maybe we
That's
can
a
pick that
very
up a little bit later once you
That's a
finish
very
your.
big question. Yeah, I was going to
Yes.
say I have a
Yeah.
section on how to deal with a compassion fatigue, so I can probably answer that question at the
Sure.
time.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Just hold on a little bit. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. So compassion fatigue, which is when everything goes wrong. So what exactly am I talking about? Compassion fatigue is a kind of an answer to the question, is there such a thing as too much empathy? Or is there such a thing as too much compassion? Yes, there is. There is such a thing as too much of anything, right? And we know what Islam says about it. Islam says that everything should be done in moderation, not too much, not too little, unless, of course, it's haram. But even things that are allowed to do or beneficial to do, too much of it can often be very heavy or burdensome for us. So try, and that, that's the same thing for empathy. Try and be moderate when you're doing it, or try and balance. Because what over empathizing does, it can really interfere. On the one hand, it can interfere with our rational mind, because then we start making decisions out of emotions. And some of them may be okay, depending on the context, but others may really be harmful, or you may not realize it at that time, but making that decision may not have been the right thing to do. And that's when you start making decision more with your heart than with your head, they say. But what actually that phrase is when you're starting to be more empathetic and less objective. So you're not really thinking of things rationally, because sometimes you feel like doing something with a good intention, but it could be that that's not the right thing to do in that situation. There's a better way to do it, or there's a more right way to do it. So we need to keep sight of that bigger picture, right? We need to be able to balance our decision-making process with equal parts emotion and equal parts intelligent. I'm not saying don't be compassionate, but balance it. Make sure you have equal parts. And then also being empathetic all the time can kind of be counterproductive, and that's where compassion fatigue comes in. Fatigue, or compassion fatigue, is rather it's defined as a secondhand kind of shock experience or stressful reaction. It's a type of stress that results from wanting to help people too much, right? Or when you're trying to really help people who are traumatized or have significant emotions, and you're taking that on, and sometimes you can take too much of that on. So when that happens, I'm just going to go through the symptoms again. Physical symptoms: lack of sleep, you feel really tired, you feel heavy, right? There's a heaviness you can feel in your chest, there's a heaviness you can feel in your shoulders and your back. Appetite changes, you may want to eat too much to comfort yourself, or too little because your stomach's hurting, right? It depends on who you are. Headaches, backaches, general body aches. Psychologically, you could be very irritated, right? You can be so irritated and frustrated that any small thing just causes you to lash out. You're emotionally exhausted. Depersonalization. So depersonalization is when you kind of, your personality changes, but it changes in a way where it becomes less and less. So you're not really showing your personality or who you are or who you used to be, right? So you're starting to detach from your personality. That's depersonalization. You feel numb. Cognitively, you feel self-contempt. Sometimes when you're being too compassionate, and it doesn't work, or sometimes you feel like it's not making a difference, you can start to blame yourself and say, is it me? Am I the person who's not making a difference? Am I not good enough? So self-contempt can kind of come in that way. Dissatisfied, similar to self-contempt. Racing thoughts, you're thinking about all these things that may or may not be true, depends. And you're starting to be overly critical of yourself and the impact that you're making, within your family, within your circles. So all of that is compassion fatigue, kind of in a nutshell. I should mention here, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms and you feel like it's compassion fatigue, you need to reach out for help, okay? Sometimes you just can't do it alone, and that's okay. Please reach out for help. And that help can come in any form. You can talk to a counselor, you can talk to a family member if you don't want to talk to a counselor, whatever you're comfortable with. Read some resources online, but try and reach out for support, okay? Right, so burnout then. When I'm talking about burnout, compassion fatigue can be very sudden, be something that you really don't notice happening until it already has. Burnout happens over time, and it's a much more serious and severe form of compassion fatigue. So it's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion when you have that prolonged stressful reaction, it's almost as if you're so overwhelmed and drained that you just can't do it anymore, you know. um, and the reason it's called burnout is because it's related to giving too much. So when you give, and give, and then you can't give anymore, that's burnout. Okay. Because I realize some of these symptoms are very similar to when you're having a mental breakdown or when something else is happening in your life. But for burnout specifically, it's when you're being too compassionate or giving too much. So the symptoms of burnout are a bit more severe. They're similar to compassion fatigue, but I've picked out the ones that you really need to watch out for. Okay. Um, right. So physically, you will be frequently ill. So by that, I mean you can get random sicknesses all the time and they're unexplainable. So you don't know where they're coming from and you don't know why. When they happen in succession and you know you're being stretched too thin, then it's possible that you could have burnout. Again, muscle pains, feeling drained, when you feel like isolating yourself, when you feel like, I don't want to do it anymore, I don't want to go to work, I don't want to talk to anyone, I don't want to, when you kind of feel like you're getting depressed. So similar to getting depressed, that's probably burnout. Psychologically, you feel detached. You're like, I can't feel anymore, or I don't want to feel anymore. Depression, anxiety is very much part of burnout. Demotivated, so you're not motivated to do what you used to be motivated to do, right? And anger is a very, very strong symptom of burnout. And if you notice yourself lashing out in anger very often, try and pause, take a step back and think, why am I being angry? What exactly is going on, right? This is where reflection comes in handy. And then cognitively, self-doubt, cynicism, seeing everything through a very negative lens when you're feeling procrastinated. So this is often seen in students or people who have loads of work to do in their university or in their education. And then if you're working part-time as well, then you might get burnt out. So you start procrastinating. And then when you feel defeated, when you feel like no matter how much you try, you're just not getting it right, or you're just not being able to do it, so you feel hopeless. And that's very much a symptom of burnout. I should mention here that even though it's not a fact or completely true, like I said, it depends on the context, but studies have shown that people um, who need to be in control at all times, people with perfectionist tendencies, or when you need everything to be perfect or a certain way, they usually develop burnout because uh, they're not being able to balance the amount of energy they give a certain thing. So everything they do is 100% energy. If a person is not able to delegate or let other people do certain things, they can experience burnout very often. Even those who always see the world pessimistically, so you're a cup half empty kind of person rather than a cup half full kind of person, then you are more likely to experience burnout. But this is just what the research says. Anyone can experience burnout at any time. And if you are experiencing it, then please do reach out for help. I should mention here before going forward that a lot of people who experience burnout are usually either in a profession that's to do with compassion. So if you're a nurse or a psychologist or a counselor um, or you are a carer, you support people, or in the service industry, if that's your job, then you're more likely to experience that. If you're a teacher as well, teachers do tend to take in a lot from their students. You can experience burnout. If you're a doctor, and then also if you're not in any of those professions, but you're a student or you're someone who just really is empathetic, you feel the troubles of the world around you and they really affect you, then you can be more likely to experience compassion fatigue or burnout to a certain degree. Okay. Right. So that's the symptoms. I'm going to go to the next section. Any questions here?
Sarah, um,
Right.
what about faith leaders and spiritual mentors, as Sister Naseem is asking, guides, humanitarian activists? Um, do they go through it as well? Time?
Yes, they can. They definitely can. Anyone whose job involves helping other people, I think they're more likely to experience compassion fatigue. And then also, I think volunteers also do experience compassion fatigue when you're volunteering for a cause, you're very passionate for that cause, right? And so that means that you're more likely to just give 100% all the time. And I should mention here that I know Lanterns of Light is a volunteer-led or movement, I should say. It's a very, very, very good the work that you do, mashallah. And having been a volunteer before, I'm still a volunteer. So Sazesh is just a volunteer thing. Um, I really do understand how much of how difficult rather it can be to be a volunteer, because there's there can be a lot you're doing, and oftentimes you don't see the results of that until much, much later. So there's that time factor. And then there can be a lot going on in your life as well. I mean, you're studying or you're trying to earn, make a living for yourself. So there's so many things going on. But you know what? Being a volunteer is rewarding in and of itself. And if you do notice that you are experiencing compassion fatigue, or you've lost your motivation, you don't really feel like you're connected anymore, then possibly this next section can kind of help you out to try and figure that out and come back to being motivated for the causes that you're working for, because it is very important. It's very important to kind of stick to, that to things that can show your passion, right?
You say mothers also go through that quite from time to time, because obviously if you have 3 or 4 kids and you're
Mhm.
constantly giving of yourself,
Right.
could you get to this point where you are fatigued from the compassion that you have to show to your children, right? So there's a whole lot.
So for mothers, I think that's the predominant reason why a lot of mothers experience postnatal depression, because not only have you gone through this very biological and physical thing, and labor and giving birth is not easy. We know that it's not easy. But I think what's overlooked so much is that emotional or that compassionate part of being a mother. So from the time you conceive to the time when you're giving birth, and all those things are happening, that's an onslaught of emotions on a mother. And I haven't been a mother, but I've spoken to loads of mothers, and they all tell me the same thing: is that in those moments after you've given birth, it's like every single emotion is bursting out of you, you know? And that's that's the main reason why I think we experience a lot of postnatal depression, because we try to, it's natural as human beings, we try to damp down those emotions so that we're not feeling so much. And that can kind of be a reason of, or rather an indication of us being burnt out. But yes, as you said, mothers with so many children, yeah, you're
And then
constantly
having to look
dealing.
after husbands as
And
well, right? So there's
that's
another
actually what I
child
was
there.
gonna say. That's what I was gonna say, is that
Yeah,
I don't think, I'm pretty sure there are men who appreciate it, but there are also men who don't appreciate it. They don't
absolutely,
really
absolutely.
understand.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand. I completely get it. But it would be good if they do. I really do think so, because giving too much compassion, giving too much of yourself is is really not healthy, especially if you don't have anyone who's supporting you, if you don't have that constant who's pumping that energy back into you. So yeah, that's a
And it's
very good point.
almost,
Yeah.
yeah, I almost feel that women's sort of desires to always give, and be that compassionate person, right?
Mm,
Forgetting that there is kind of a balance there.
yeah.
Sister Sabra was just saying that in your profession, would you say spirituality helps to relieve this? And I'm sure probably you're coming to that point. But is that something that you can shift to a spiritual living that could help to sort of help this burnout?
You know what? As a psychologist, I studied practically, when I was studying to be a psychologist, I studied all the theories, the research, the secular part of it. But it wasn't until I studied Islamic psychology when I realized, you know what, spirituality does play a part. It plays a really huge part, and we often undermine it. But that connection that you have with a higher power, and I say higher power because there are some people who don't believe in God, but they do believe in a higher power, and studies have shown that that belief in itself has helped them. It helps them deal, it helps them cope. So this belief that we have in God, it does help us. It genuinely does, and sometimes we don't notice how exactly it's helping us, but it really does.
Yeah.
Especially, I think last week we talked about tawakkul and faith, and having that tawakkul in a higher being, in a being that you know is perfect and can help you at any time. All you have to do is ask. I mean, that's a big thing. That's a big realization, and I think we don't realize it because we've been told that since we were little girls. But I come to appreciate that more and more every year, that whenever I'm in difficulty, I have someone. I'm never fully alone. And that in itself is the biggest support that you can have. That, even if, I mean, astaghfirullah, I hope that we're never ever alone. But even if we are, even if there's a time when we don't have anyone, we have Allah. We do have Him. We're never fully alone.
Absolutely.
So,
Because in a
You said that beautifully. Absolutely.
yeah,
Sorry. Yes.
no, I was just going to comment only because in the secular world, and you see how many mental health issues because the lack of belief or any kind of spirituality, be it Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, or whatever. Research probably must have shown in your profession, I don't know. So that's why I was just trying to sort of ask. I wish, there was enough spirituality globally to combat all these mental health issues.
yeah, no, thank you so much for bringing it up. It is a very good point, and even in my educations, I would say, when I was practicing to kind of be a psychologist, there is a whole section on faith-based practices and how they help. So actually, you're reminding me of this. I know this is slightly away from the topic, but I'm part of this charity called Inspirited Minds, and we release podcast episodes every month. And our last month's episode was with a Muslim man in Manchester. His name was Hanif, and he was kind of commissioned to do some research for the Mental Health Foundation, I want to say. So a particular mental health foundation in the UK, I think it's the main one, I'm not sure. And his paper was about how going to a mosque, right? So that's a religious institution, a mosque, is helpful for men who are suffering from mental health problems. And that was the main research that he was doing, mashallah. He shared the publication with me, and it is phenomenal, the research that they were able to do to show something as simple as spending time in the mosque and how it helps you as a Muslim. That was for Muslim men, but how it helps you as a Muslim just deal with your mental health problems. I mean, it's so phenomenal. And that's not to say that you shouldn't see a psychologist or you shouldn't see a counselor or get help for it. No, everything's a balance, right? But these religious practices, they also play a role. And I believe, as Brother Hanif said in that episode, he said that he believes medication and can help as much as religious practices can help, right? So both of them. And he kind of said it in Urdu. He said dawa, which is medication, and dua, which is also like, a religious practice, like asking God for help. And I thought that was very profound, because if we can try balancing those two, then we can definitely be in a better position to help ourselves and then be compassionate and help other people, inshallah. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up.
Thank you, Sarah. Absolutely.
Thank you.
A sister was just asking. You might be picking this up later on, but if you are actually doing a lot for somebody, how do you stop being burned out and without even hurting that person? Because now people are so used to having that compassion upon themselves, you cannot withdraw from it. So I don't know if you can answer it now, or perhaps maybe when you're talking about how to re-energize.
I am coming to that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'm coming to that, so I'll definitely answer it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so moving into re-energizing compassion, or how can we fill in our burnt out energy? Okay, so the first approach I want to share with you is a 3R approach. I'll tell you quickly what it is. The first one is called recognize. So it's really important to recognize when you're feeling fatigued or burnt out. Okay, based on the symptoms that I just spoke about in the last section. Once you've identified it, you can quickly move to the next one, and that's reverse. Okay, and I don't mean reversing time. I mean trying to work to undo the damage, or not even undo, but stop the burnout in its tracks by seeking support. Okay, and I'll come to the seeking support bit a little later on. And then finally, resilience. So resilience is about building your resilience. When I say resilience, a lot of people can confuse it with being patient. It's not exactly being patient. Being patient is a part of being resilient. There are other parts to resilience as well, like perseverance, which is slightly different to patience, forbearance, which is again slightly different, and then creative problem solving. All of these are parts of resilience. Again, it's another topic all on itself. But if you do check my 21 Day of Positivity program, I have a lot on resilience in there and how to build it. Okay, so try building your resilience. Some ways are by self-care, which I'm also going to be talking about right now, and then healthy coping mechanisms, which I will also talk about right now. So that's the 3R approach. And then the second approach, I think I moved too quickly, but I'm pretty sure you get the 3R approach: recognizing, reversing, and then building your resilience. The second approach is boundaries. And I think this answers the question that was asked a little bit ago. When you're giving too much and you don't really know how to say no, right? And that's what creating boundaries is. Creating boundaries doesn't mean being rude. It doesn't mean saying you're going to do something and then don't follow through on your word. Creating boundaries is understanding, being self-aware enough to understand what position you are in, and then assessing yourself. If you're going to commit to this, are you going to be able to follow through on it, or are you not? And then if you are, go for it. But then you've given your word, right? And you can't really break that. If you know you're not going to be able to give your 100% to it, or you're not going to be doing it justice, then you need to consider saying no. You need to consider saying, I hear you, I understand you, and I really want to help. I genuinely do, but I can't. I don't want to be able to say yes and then not do it right or not do it justice. Because there is always going to be another person who can help. There's always going to be another person who Allah will send to help that person. Okay? And I know there can be a bit of guilt associated with that when you want to say no, especially if you're really close to the person or you know that this person is relying on you. So yes, you can definitely feel guilty, but there comes a time when you need to really think about what you can do, right? When I think about creating boundaries, there are quite a few exercises you can do to create your boundaries, but when I think about it, I think of my energy. So I think of my force field around me, and I kind of ask myself, do I have enough? Do I have enough to do this? And there are days when, I'll be honest with you, I really, really, really want to say yes, but I say no. I say, I'm sorry, I can't. Can we do it in a later date? Or if I'm able to, I'll get back in touch with you, but right now I can't, and it takes a lot to admit that to yourself, to admit that you're in a place where you physically or mentally or spiritually cannot do that. But I think it's better to be honest. I think it's better to communicate and effectively tell that person, this is what I'm going through. You don't have to be detailed about it, because I know sometimes when we want to say no, we follow it up with so many explanations of why we're saying no. You don't owe that person that explanation. You can give that person a very brief explanation, but don't really make excuses, because that means that you're undermining how much you need, right? And that's why I just put this one thing on the slide, because it's so important. If we learn how to say no in the best way, in the most compassionate way that we can, then we'll be able to say yes when the time is right, you know? And I think that sister was saying is that you give and give and give, and that person's expecting so much, and you don't know how to say no anymore. But you can say no. Well, I think it's more about you're afraid to say no, because you know how to say no. It's no, I'm sorry, I can't do it, right? It's really easy to say that. Um, but I think it's more to do with the fear. If I say no, what's going to happen? We can never fully know what's going to happen with the other person, but we can know what's going to happen with us, because we're choosing to take that step, that very uncomfortable step, to help us, to help give ourselves time and space. And then another thing about boundaries is when you have a toxic person in your life. And this is, I think, a big topic of conversation right now. I've been having it with my sisters as well and my friends. A lot of, I think, the media trajectory right now is, if you have a toxic person, you cut them out of your life. And I think, again, that's very extreme. What you can do with a toxic person is create boundaries, So keep them in your life, especially if they're, someone who's close to you, or a friend, or you understand why they're behaving the way they are. Don't cut them out of your life. Keep them in your life. But create those healthy boundaries for yourself and communicate it to them and say, look, I want to be there for you, and I know you want me to be there as well. So let's be in each other's lives, but let's try and do things a bit differently, so that we can both be happier and we can both be healthier, right? And so whatever those boundaries are you're creating, don't make them unreasonable. Try and be as compassionate as possible for yourself and for the other person as well. And I can go on and on and on about boundaries right now. I think you guys kind of can see that. But yeah, it's very important to create boundaries. If you guys want to know more about boundaries, again, Google is the best place. They're not very Islamic resources on how to create boundaries, unfortunately. I haven't even come across any majalis or anything about creating boundaries. I think that can be a gap that we can try and fill, because it's very important to do that, so that we can be compassionate to ourselves and other people. So,
Sarah, because we always hear in the majalises that be compassionate, be kind to people. That's good work. You'll get heaven, you'll get thawab, and you do as much as you can for others. So we're all the time listening that we need to do things for others, and we feel guilty when we don't do that. But what you're saying is that you have to have some boundaries to be able to actually not have that burnout, and to live a life which is, important and in service to God, but at the same time not be sort of compassionate fatigues, right? So very true in a way, Sarah, that it's important to talk about this and learn actually how to keep those boundaries, because we haven't got an idea of how to do it. And perhaps maybe we should have, and Sister Naseem is here, maybe that's one majlis we can have sometime, inshallah.
Yes,
not telling us to do, but sometimes withhold as well. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on a very important point, especially because we're part of these beautiful communities all around the world. A lot of people can come to us at the same time and say, oh, can you help with this? And when they see that we're the person's really good at it, or for example, I'm really good at it, the person, like, word spreads, and then 100 people are coming to you and say, oh, can you help with this? Can you help with this? Can you help with this? So you have like 1 billion people or 100 people coming to you and asking you for the same thing. And there are times, I'll tell you personally, there are times when I've had to say, I'm sorry, I genuinely can't. I want to, but I can't, you know? And it's okay to say that, because you don't have to be everywhere or do everything. There's so many people in our communities, talented people, mashallah, who are able to really, really contribute. You know, give everyone that opportunity to do that. So that's how I see saying no. So I've kind of made it positive, is that if you're saying no, you're giving someone else an opportunity. And I
And
think
one
that's
sister has
nice.
beautifully said that sometimes they don't know themselves that they're, you know, taking so much out of you. So
Mm.
if you politely say that, I cannot do it, then they realize that, right? So some people might just sponge off you without even realizing that they're doing that, right? So we have to know
Pretty
when to say,
profound.
when to say no. Yeah, absolutely.
I should say that's a very positive way of looking at it. Mashallah. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you for sharing. So that's boundaries. Inshallah, Naseem Bhai, if you can do a lecture on that, that would be amazing. Something to look forward to. Okay, so I'll move on then to self-care. I think we've all heard self-care, so I'm just going to do a quick exercise on it and we can kind of discuss it as we go along. I've got a short table here. It looks very technical, but it's not. I just want us to maybe grab some pen and paper and see, do we really do these things, and how often do we do these things? So there's a table at the bottom that's kind of the key. So 1 indicates that you do this very rarely or poorly. 2 indicates that you do this sometimes, you're okay doing it, kind of. And then 3 is you're doing it often, you're doing it well, you're comfortable doing it. And then the star is, I would like to do this more often. And I've kind of taken this from a much bigger activity. Of course, I realized that there's not enough time to do the entire activity. So I've picked up the special ones that I think we can possibly be doing a bit more of. And I'll go over them one by one. As you're getting a paper and pen, just listen to me droning on about it. The first one is wearing clothes that help me feel good about myself. So that's a physical self-care. And oftentimes, I've written clothes there, but what I actually also want to try is jewelry. As women, we have quite a bit of jewelry and fun accessories or stuff like that at home. You don't need a reason to wear the jewelry. You can wear it anytime. If you have a free day and you're not doing anything and you just think, wow, I've got some really nice jewelry or some really nice clothes. I've got a new pair of shoes, for example. I've got something I'm excited about. Put it on. Put it on, sit down and do your daily things, or put it on. And even I think there was a narration that I read a while ago, is that you can even adorn yourself before praying, right? So that can be a good reason for adorning yourself. So, and that counts as self-care. Just look at it. Just look at how Islam has thought about self-care, and we don't even know it. So you don't need a reason to do it. You can wear your clothes and jewelry and just feel good about yourself in those moments, right? Or pray. You can do it for reciting dua. You can do it for playing with, your kids if you have kids, or talking to your family members, or just sitting down to watch some TV. Whatever it is, you're doing that for yourself. And then the second one is rest when I'm sick. The reason I put this here is because sometimes when we're feeling sick, we don't want to rest. We just don't. We feel like we're fine. We can do. We'll take some Panadol or something, and we'll be fine. No, the reason you're sick is because there's something wrong. Whether it's physical, mental, whatever it is, there's something wrong. Now that means you need to stop. You need to assess. That assessment can involve going to the doctor or the psychologist. That assessment can involve taking a thermometer, checking your fever. Whatever kind of assessment it is, you're stopping. And you're taking that time to consider what's going wrong, and then think about what you need. If you need rest, do that. If you need to say no and create a boundary, do that, right? If you need to maybe do some further investigation, for example, then do that, right? You need to take that time though. Take that time and do it and stop. And yeah, there are probably going to be 100 things waiting for you, but that's okay because you're taking that time to look after yourself. So that's why I put the second one in there. The third one, I'm just going to go through them. So if you do want to interrupt me, go ahead. So the third one, express my feelings in a healthy way. And I've put that there, in a healthy way, because there are ways of expressing your feelings that are not healthy. Like, I think in anger, sometimes we can probably say or do things that are not healthy. In sadness, we can be prompted to isolate ourselves and not really consider why we're sad. Sometimes when we're having a very strong emotional reaction, we can tend to lash out in a certain way or even lead to some unhealthy practices like drug abuse or alcohol abuse or smoking. I know loads of people smoke. It's very tempting to do those things. I'm not gonna lie. But it's important to express your feelings in a healthy way. So I'm not saying don't express them. Oh, I wish I had those notes with me right now, but there was a previous presentation I was doing a couple of months back where I talked about how to express. Let me see if I can remember. So for anger, I think I was talking about healthy ways of expressing anger. Screaming into a pillow was one of them. It's okay to scream into a pillow, preferably when an mahram is not there. So in the comfort of your own home, do that. Um, throwing throwing something on the wall that's not going to break. So throwing ice at the wall is very good. It's a very, very good way of taking your anger out because one, the ice is not being harmed. Two, the wall is not being harmed. But okay, maybe the wall is being harmed. It kind of depends how hard you're throwing the ice. And I don't know if the wall is going to talk on the day of judgment, as we've been told. But I would prefer you throwing ice at the wall than actually throwing furniture at someone else. So you can express your anger in that way. Alternatively, you can talk about it. When you're feeling angry, try and talk about it. I know the famous quote of Imam Ali is, if you're standing, sit. If you're sit lying down, that helps. It helps a lot. Do wuzu. Distract yourself when you're feeling angry. If you distract yourself, or if you eat when you're feeling angry, then immediately you're moving the focus of your mind away from what's really making your anger come out at that time. So that's very healthy. That's anger. There are also other ways that you can deal with sadness, frustration, or other such emotions. So whatever you're doing, make sure you're expressing it in a healthy way. And then do something comforting just for me. And again, I think a lot of people think, myself included, that it's guilty to take that time and do that for yourself when there's so much else that you could be doing. But you know what? Sometimes you need it. Sometimes you genuinely need that time where you're just doing what you want to do. And you can choose to call it selfish if you want to, but I choose to call it self-care because that's what I need. And yeah, if you're doing it all the time, then you probably are being selfish. But again, try and balance it, right? Oh, try to make sure that there is a time when you are doing that, and then you've set that time aside, but then you're not taking up all the time to do that, right? So that's another kind of psychological self-care. Next one is a spiritual type. Very, very important. Recognize the things that give meaning to my life. Purpose. I talked about this last week as well. Purpose is so important. We don't realize it, but a lot of problems that we face as human beings is when we've lost it. When we've lost purpose. So we don't know why we're here, what we're doing. We're going through the motions. Or maybe we've just never had some time to think about it. Islam is such a beautiful religion that it's given us our purpose on a silver platter. It said, this is your purpose. So you're not wasting time trying to look for it. even though sometimes we do waste time to look for it. But everyone's journey is different. That's fine. Try to recognize those things. Take that time to even refuel your spiritual self. I think that helps a lot. Um, I think that Naseem Bhai can give us a little bit more information about that, inshallah. Next one, ask someone in my social support for help when I need it. So that's social self-care. I talked about support networks last time, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time on it this week. So you can check out that video, last week's video, if you want more information. But I think the important bit here is asking when you need it. Because as human beings, we genuinely do not like ever being weak. We don't like feeling vulnerable. We don't like admitting that we have a problem. But then I feel that that's also very generalized because there are some people who only complain about their problems. When I was doing one of our first programs, that's the example I gave. Sometimes you can come across a person who you feel is just complaining all the time. You know what? That's good. It's good if they're sharing their problems. It's good if they've chosen you to be their support network. Because it's so hard to talk to someone. It's so hard to confide in someone when you're going through something. And I say this honestly as someone who's gone through it. Because you could be going through something that you don't understand. And so you're like, what am I going to tell the other person? What's the other person going to think of me? I'm not even going to cry because crying is a sign of weakness, which it's not. But some people think it is, So it's really important then to see this as a self-care, that when you're asking someone for support, any kind of support, any kind of help, it's good because you're taking that step not out of weakness, no, but out of something that you need, right? You've chosen this person to be in your support network and you're kind of forming that emotional connection with them. That's what compassion is all about. And then finally, say no to excessive new responsibilities at work. And I've put that there at work because in a professional setting, it's hard to say no. It is hard to say no in a personal setting as well, yes, but this is a form of creating a boundary. And yeah, I think I've spoken a lot about boundaries.
No, Sarah, these are really interesting ones, and I've been thinking about them. And especially when you said that asking for help, we are not very good at sort of saying, "Oh, I need some help," and we might, think
Yeah.
sign of weakness if you ask for help.
Mm.
Which is so important that you've highlighted that bit as well. And
Yeah.
if you ask me, I think I'll have to give stars to all of them in a way.
You know what? That's perfectly okay. That's okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, you don't realize that it's so important to be able to self-care, to be able to give others care, right? So as they say, fill your own cup before you can fill someone else's cup.
Yes.
And Sister Naseem said, actually, it's also all about being self-aware, right? So when you do exercises like this, you start to become more aware of yourself in a way,
Yes.
and see what is lacking and what I need to work on a bit more. So I think it's a really cool exercise. Wish we were in a setting where we could be sort of together and discuss these. But I'm sure everyone who's watching and listening in is trying to do that too.
I hope so.
And I must admit that I don't know if any of the participants want to add anything here, but I think these are some great points to sort of take home and work on, really.
Yeah. If there was anything
I haven't changed my, sorry, yes. When he said wear clothes that help me feel good, I was thinking, actually, in this COVID, I have only worn 3 pairs of clothes and I only took out 2 scarves and I keep changing them. And today I thought, no, it's Kushali, I need to take out another scarf. So sometimes it does happen, right? That we sort of tend not to sort of wear good clothes, especially now that we're not doing anything. And one sister saying these are really good points, especially before Ramadan, to be able to sort of gear yourself up, to be able to have that spiritual sense, and say no to the things that you cannot do, so you're able to do more of what you want to do. Absolutely. And
I love that. I actually do love that because sorry, I'll just interject right there, because when you're thinking about spiritually, I just thought that reflection. And I try to tell everyone, and I also do it myself, I reflect for at least 5 minutes before going to bed every night. And I think it's an Islamic practice as well. I think it's called tadabbur, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me
I
if I'm
think
wrong.
muhasaba as well as muhasaba, right? Yeah,
Ah,
tadabbur is
yes, yes. That's
tafakkur, and
the one.
tadabbur is that, but the muhasaba at night before you go to sleep, right? Take
The
account of
muhasaba,
your
that's
life.
the word.
Yes, yes.
Right. I forgot the word. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very important thing to do. Just 5 minutes before you go to sleep.
That's really good, because then you can recognize the things that give meaning to your life, right?
Yes.
So when you've sort of come to that point in the night and you think, actually, did I do the things that really give me meaning? Then you can say, okay, tomorrow, inshallah, another day, right? So
You
let
know,
me take stock for today.
when
And
we're talking about this, I remember a little bit of advice that was given to me a couple of years ago. I used to wake up in the middle of the night and remember things. It was quite a tough time in my life. And the advice I was given was keep a notepad and pen on your bedside table or under your pillow. So when you're waking up in the middle of the night, note it down, and then it's been transferred to paper, so you're not thinking about it anymore. That's that
absolutely.
transfer of that energy. Once it's gone onto the notepad, you can easily turn back around, fall asleep, forget about it, because you already know you'll be reminded about it the next day. So I think that's a good way of trying to do that.
And nowadays you've got so many journals and beautiful books, and the Jeem journal and the Alhamdulillah journal, and
Yeah.
all these different things, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we are really, really blessed today. So no excuse for not doing that. Thank you. So
Yes.
please do continue. Otherwise, we might be talking here all along. So please do continue. Thank you.
I think we're near the end though. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about alternative therapies. I think this is the last slide. Number one, meditation. Meditation, you can do it in any way. Some people have said when I've suggested meditation, they're like, but how? How do you do it? And it's not something that's set in stone. So there's no right or wrong way of meditating. You can do it in any way that you want. There are so many videos by Muslim people, Muslims online on YouTube that you can just follow, and I think there's an organization that does do mindful meditations by some Muslims in our community, I think. I don't really remember,
Yeah,
but
so there is a very beautiful one. In fact, we've had some meditation by muslimmeditation.com. Um,
okay.
and they are
I
really,
think
really good.
I
So
think
there's
those are the ones I was referring to.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a sister Rawan Kara, she does that, and there's a sister
Yes.
Fatima Aga, she does that. So we've got, mashallah, quite a few people nowadays coming up with some meditation techniques on the
Yeah,
names of
and
Allah
really
subhanahu wa ta'ala as well.
exactly
Yeah,
incorporating Islam into it, which is quite
absolutely.
important as well. So, meditation, again, you can do it for as short as 20 minutes a day or 1 hour a week. Take just 1 hour out of your entire week and do your meditation. It really does help. And then ecotherapy. Ecotherapy is a form of therapy where you're spending time in nature. I think going to the parks is still allowed, if I'm not mistaken. So even though you can't meet people, you can meet nature. And it's so, so beneficial. If you're never the kind of person to plant or get your hands dirty, try doing that. Try taking up a new hobby, planting, even just going to maybe a nearby farm or a strawberry farm. Strawberry picking is so much fun. Or go to like a garden and just spend some time there on your own. And that can be your reflection time of the day when you're spending time on your own, just reflecting on the beauty of God's creation. It really is therapeutic. And that's why they've coined this term ecotherapy or ecological therapy, where you're getting therapy for free from nature.
And
It's
there's now
very
there's now
important.
this thing about earthing, right? There's a big thing about how earthing helps to do,
Yes.
yes,
Are,
and
are you
also
talking about grounding?
grounding, earthing, yes, grounding,
Yes,
yes.
yes, 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 definitely.
And
Um,
also tree hugging, actually. So
Tree hugging, yeah. The reason tree hugging is so important, or rather beneficial, because there is a lot of energy surrounding the tree during the day. And so when you're around those plants or those trees, what happens is you're becoming a part of that energy, and your energy is interacting with their energy, and that is kind of imbibing. So that energy is positive. It's raw positive energy. Like even when sometimes we're told to pray. So actually, we pray on earth, right? So when we're praying on earth, that's the transfer of energy from the earth, from that mohar, to our system, to our energy. And that's the same thing that you get from ecotherapy or tree hugging. That's why it's really, really beneficial.
And I'd like to just give a comment from my sister Nasim. She says, Imam Rada al-Islam also has said that even if you have a few minutes in your day, try and plant a tree because it's very therapeutic. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so aromatherapy. So aromatherapy is kind of similar to ecotherapy, but this is using essential oils. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what essential oil is, but if you don't, it is kind of like these oils that are readily available anywhere. If you're in the UK, Amazon, best place to get anything. Try and get some essential oils for yourself. It works through sense of smell and then skin absorption, right? So you can use maybe a diffuser and put a few drops of essential oil in it and smell it. It really is beneficial. Different oils help with different things. For example, calendula oil that I've got on the slide, that can really help calm you down. And okay, it's got so many properties, I can't remember them at this time, but they do definitely have loads of different properties. You can get bathing salts with essential oils in it. They are really, really beneficial. Body oils, creams, and lotions, and kind of use them, in your daily skincare routine. Nowadays, I think you get facial steamers as well, and they really help to kind of calm your facial area. I've never tried facial steaming, but it definitely does come in handy, especially if you use essential oil. Actually, I have heard this is not an essential oil, like a fragrant one, but it's got clove oil. So it's essential oil made of cloves. And I've heard that if you do a mock, so if you do a facial steam of that, it really helps to clear your chest area. I think during COVID time, a lot of people have been using that, and I've heard that as well. So something to look into. Clay masks, cold and hot compresses, all of these things are part of like aromatherapy. And yeah, I think definitely doing research on that. That's an alternative therapy that you can use that can help you. And just especially if you're experiencing burnout, um, doing these things, which kind of can help to bring that sense of feeling back into you. So if you're feeling detached, if you're feeling numb, then this can, all these sensations that you feel, they kind of bring that energy back to you. And then massage. I know a lot of people, when I say massage, they're like, oh my God, massage. But you know what? Massage is like the transfer of energy as well. And it gives a lot of physical relief. And you don't have to go to a massage therapist. You can try doing massage on yourself or on your family member. It's really easy. You don't have to get it right, but it's the intention that counts. Okay. So massage can really, really help you just look after yourself. And then reflection, I think we've already talked about that, becoming aware of yourself and your mental processes. And then support groups. And I know I talked about this a lot last week, but I'm going to briefly mention it here. Support groups are so important, you know, and I'm not really aware. I know Lantern of Light is kind of a support group, which is great. I'm not aware of a lot of other online support groups, but if you can find one, especially for the thing that you're experiencing, or burnout, compassion fatigue, anxiety, depression, whatever it is, it can really help, because one, it's a non-judgmental space, and two, you don't know what you can learn from there. There are people who are experiencing something similar to you, and you can easily pick that up. So don't undermine support groups. They're very, very important. And I think that kind of brings me to the end. So I just wanted to end on this note that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is kind, the Holy Prophet has said, and He loves kindness on all matters. And that is the basis of empathy and compassion. So inshallah, I know tomorrow is the 15th of Shaban. So hopefully, inshallah, we can pray that we're all able to just build our compassion, balance it, and help like fill our energy up, and then help other people as well through that, inshallah.
Thank you very much. That was really inspiring, Sarah. I don't know if we have some time for any questions. If anyone would like to ask a question, then maybe we can open it up to some questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just having everyone comment saying thank you very much to you, Sarah.
Right.
It was a great session. I don't know, does anyone want to ask? I was just thinking, one thing that came to my mind is, Sarah, that sometimes we get overly involved and take on another person's pain, and we just can't get away from it. Sort of, we cannot build that emotional boundary sometimes. It could be a loved one, it could be somebody you really care for. I know you've given all these things, but how do you I mean, I know you said recognize it, but sometimes it goes unrecognized, you reckon?
So are you trying to say when you do so much for someone and it goes unrecognized?
By yourself, yes, because you get involved in
right,
somebody
right.
else's pain, you see, and you just suck in that pain from someone else, and you think, oh, it becomes the pain becomes part and parcel of yours, right? You don't even know that it's happening to you sometimes, right?
Yeah, and I often wonder how psychologists like yourselves cope with that.
Yeah,
how do you cut off? Or
it's very hard. I'll say that it's not easy because as human beings, empathy is a part of us, and as you said, as a psychologist as well, for me, what really helps is self-awareness exercises. I try and do them a lot. Sometimes I don't have time to do it, but I make sure I'm slotting in some time every week just to reflect on how my week has gone, see where things have maybe not gone according to plan or are not working out, or I'm feeling something that is not explainable, and then trying to identify where that's coming from. So that helps. And then I also have my own therapist who kind of helps me when I'm feeling fatigued or burnt out. And I think that's standard practice for every therapist. You need to have your own therapist who can kind of help you out. And that also helps quite a bit. So yeah, therapy, it really helps.
If there aren't any more questions, we will end there. But I've been sent a beautiful little video clip, and I'd like to share that just to remember our 12th Imam. And thank you very much, Sarah, for this lovely session. And we've learned a lot.
Thank you so much for having me.
I never knew there was something called compassionate fatigue. So I've learned something new and recognized that. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for all of you that have joined us today. And inshallah, we pray for each other tomorrow. And remember each other in your dua. So I'm just going to share this little clip with us. Don't mind. Hope you can see that. Yep, you can see that. Inshallah. Oh, I think I may not have shared my.
همه لحن خوش‌آواییم در به در کوچه تنهاییم. ای دو سه تا کوچه ز ما دورتر، ای دو سه تا کوچه ز ما دورتر، نغمه تو از همه پرشورتر. کاش که این فاصله را کم کنی، کاش که این فاصله را کم کنی، محنت این قافله را کم کنی. کاش که همسایه ما میشدی، مایه آسایه ما میشدی. هر که به دیدار تو نایل شود، یک شب حلال مسائل شد. ای زلیخا دست از دامان یوسف بازکش، ای زلیخا دست از دامان یوسف بازکش، تا صبا پیراهنش را سوی کنعان آورد.
تو همون حس غریبی که همیشه با منی، تو بهونه هر عاشق واسه زنده بودنی، تو امید انتظاری تو دلای نامی، مثل دیدن ستاره تو شبای ناپدید. چه غریبونه گذشتن جمعه های سوت و کور، هنوزم ما نرسیدی ای تجلی ظهور. با تو که گفتی تکیه‌گاه عاشقایی، میدونم یه دنیا نوری ساده ای بی انتهایی، مثل لالای بارون تو کبیر بی صدایی. تو خود عشقی میدونم ناجی فاصله هایی. تو همون حس غریبی که همیشه با منی، تو بهونه هر عاشق واسه زنده بودنی، تو امید انتظاری تو دلای نامی، مثل دیدن ستاره تو شبای ناپدید. عمریه دلم گرفته گله دارم از جدایی، غایب همیشه حاضر تو کجایی، تو کجایی، تو کجایی، تو کجایی.
That was a beautiful eulogy on the 12th Imam, inshallah. So, Sarah and all our guests, all who were here today joining us, iltimas dua, and have a good evening, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.